Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of Apex Ascend. This is where we teach lions how to rise and roar. You are a lion, so let your voice be heard. I'm your host, Rodney LaBruce, and today we're going to talk about something that's not just historical. It's something that is currently shaping the very world that we live in. And it's called the Southern Strategy. I've talked about it before. I've written about it a couple of times. As a matter of fact, I break it down in detail in my latest blog post. So if you get a chance, visit LaBruceForCongress.com. Go to Insights and you'll catch that latest blog. So if you have never heard of the Southern Strategy, don't worry about it. You can read about it there. You can Google it. You can Wikipedia it. But we're also going to talk about it a little bit today. So hold on to your horses. Don't go nowhere, and let's get into it. So what I want to do today is I want to walk you through what it is, why it still matters, and how we kind of refuse to be manipulated by a strategy that was never even really intended for us in the first place. A guy by the name of Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. He's apparently some smart guy from Germany who lived around the end of the 18th century to the beginning of the 19th century. He was quoted saying, "None of us or none are more hopelessly enslaved than those who falsely believe they are free." Sounds smart to me because it's something that, even though he spoke it centuries ago, it still holds true today. And you know me, sometimes I troll Facebook to see what the people are talking about. I'm not really a Twitter guy or an X guy. I think it's something else, another app out there called Blue Vine or something like that. Blue Cross, I don't know. But I don't really get heavily involved in those things. I'm still an old school guy where Facebook is my thing. Social media, I never got into MySpace back in the day, but Facebook kind of came about at the right time for me. So I'm still loyal to that for whatever the reason is. So I kind of troll it from every now and again, kind of to see what people are talking about. And came across this post from a friend of mine, a guy who I hadn't actually seen in years. We graduated high school way back in 91. Yeah, that's a long, long time ago. And off track, this has nothing to do with what we're talking about today, but I was thinking the other day. I have two young sons, and one of my oldest son was listening to a Kirk Franklin song that came out, I think, in the early '90s, so roughly 30 years ago or so. And I looked at him and I told him that, hey, I'm proud of you getting into that old school stuff. So it's old school to him, but not really old school to me, because when you look at it, it's 30 years ago. So when I was his age, 30 years from that point would have been like in 1950 or so, the 50s. So that kind of bringing that all home for me kind of, wow, pushed me over the ledge. I'm getting old. But anywho, like I said, nothing to do with our topic today, but I just wanted to bring you in a little bit on my thoughts. So I came across this post that my old high school buddy wrote, and it is referencing all the things that are going on in the media today, in politics today, in the government today, where we see Trump out there firing a lot of people and um, putting tariffs on just about the whole world. And we know that historically, none of that stuff doesn't work. But two, it throws the economy into a massive downspin, a spiral down. So we've seen in history where stuff like this can push us into recession at best, depression at worst. So we're gonna keep an eye on what's going on. But in an effort to kind of justify what he's doing, my friend posted on Facebook, he said, in quote, Clinton fired 377,000 federal employees and deported 12 million, and we loved him. Hashtag, what's the difference? So, in other words, why do we love Clinton and hate Trump when they've done similar things? So, when I saw that post, it didn't stop me, or it did stop me. I kind of shut down and stopped to read it and think about it. But I didn't stop because it was profound. I stopped because it was kind of predictable. It's what we do nowadays. It's called the historical bait and switch. We take two harmful actions, we strip them of context, and we toss them into some sort of false comparison, and as if they cancel out each other. Well, they don't, because in reality, yeah, we agree. We can agree that Bill Clinton signed off on some very harmful policies. He signed off on some welfare reform, some tough on crime laws, NAFTA, and yeah, even mass deportations. He did some, he had some bad policies, and not just him, Biden and even our beloved President Obama, they've all had some bad policies. So many of us in the political know can recognize that those policies were damaging, especially to the Black and working class communities. But saying that Clinton did it too is not a defense. It's rather an indictment of both people or all presidents, that they all have historically done bad things or had bad policies. And this is kind of where we come in today with the Southern strategy. Because when you look at an individual political candidate or an individual presidential administration and let them stand on their own, we can all agree again that every one of them has bad policies. But when you look at the Southern strategy is more than a bad policy, because it's not just one single thing that a president is trying to push through. The Southern strategy is just that. It's a strategy where it commingles, aligns, pulls things together for the common good of those who are trying to push forth this particular agenda. So the Southern strategy uses coded language, and it uses emotional bait to make people feel represented, while at the same time keeping power in the hands of a few. And the Southern strategy is pushed forward by the now Republican Party. So whereas you might have an administration who does or has bad policies in the Democratic Party, when you compare that to the Republican Party, where it has foundational issues, whereas you may have a couple of corrupt individuals in the Democratic Party, the entire basis or the entire foundation of the Republican Party is corrupt. So we're not looking at a handful of policies, and we're not looking at a handful of individuals. We're looking at an entire platform that's built on a couple of strategies. I said a couple. I'm going to talk about one today and leave the other for another time, I think. But it's built on a couple of strategies that are being enacted as we speak. It's in hyper mode these days. They used to go by the idea where you make small incremental steps in order to get your full policy in play. But now, with Trump in office, they've kind of taken off the gloves and pushed everything in fast motion, fast forwarded everything. So over time, when you look at all this coded language and this emotional bait, It worked so well that we started in our community, in our Black community, we started blaming each other for the results of this strategy rather than recognizing the strategy and the system. Yeah, back in the day, we loved Clinton. I voted for, as a matter of fact, he was my first presidential vote. He got my first vote when I was 18, I think, or whatever, around that time. He got my first vote. I voted for him a second time. So, yeah, a lot of us in the community, a lot of us in the party, we did love Clinton. Some did, some didn't. And many who loved him then have since changed their mind. So, what's the difference? The difference is that we've learned from our history. We've learned. We realize that both parties can cause harm. So when someone says, what's the difference? I say, the difference is that I've seen the playbook now. I've studied the patterns. I don't excuse Clinton or anyone else for their bad policies. But what I want to do and what I will not do is I won't let the past be weaponized to excuse the present. So when you look at Trump, don't bring up what somebody else did. Look at what he is doing and judge that on his own merit. So the Southern strategy, what was it? Well, it wasn't just a political tactic. The Southern strategy was an entire cultural reset. So most people say that it emerged around the civil rights era, but I say that it goes or it started way before that. But if you want to say formally, we can look at the civil rights era. So as the Democratic Party began supporting desegregation, you saw a Republican strategist who looked at the opportunity to exploit the white racial resentment that was building in the Democratic Party. Now, I say that even though most people look at the civil rights era as when this kind of started, I say it started way, 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 way before that because we all know that Republicans used to be used to be good. Abraham Lincoln was a Republican, and you had the Southern Democrats who pushed for slavery and the Jim Crow laws and things of that sort. Well, there were two segments in the Democratic Party, and around the 20s or 30s, they began to this other segment or this Northern Democratic Party began to grow more and more. So even way back then, you had a division in the Democratic Party where the traditional Southern Democrats wanted to keep that not just the thumb, but the foot on the throats of the blacks in America. They wanted to keep Jim Crow. They wanted to keep segregation. They wanted to keep lynching us and all that kind of stuff. But this northern growing part or section of the Democratic Party did not see that as a way forth. So even before the civil rights era, you had this division in the party, but it grew so much in the 50s and in the 60s that the Republicans who were at the time losing respect, losing votes, losing elections, they were losing their base. The Republicans were. So they looked across the aisle and saw that, hey, the Democrats they have a base as well that they are losing themselves. This Southern Democratic base that was steeped in tradition, that loved to oppress minorities and things of that sort. They wanted to, or the Republicans wanted to win that base. They wanted to get those people on their side. So how do they do it? How could they exploit this racial resentment that was building among the Southern Democrats at the time? Well, they did it without even having to use any kind of overt racism. Instead, they relied on the old way of speaking in coded language. They used things like law and order. They used things like states' rights, welfare queens, forced busing. All these things is coded language. Anytime you hear states' rights, anytime you hear law and order, this is coded language that they use way back in the day. These were terms that sounded neutral on the surface, but everybody knew who you were talking to and who these things were targeting when they were brought up. And let me be clear, none of this was accidental. It was all intentional. It was all targeted, and it was all very effective because it reshaped the entire voting blocks. It reshaped American politics for decades to come. So the shift between the Southern Democrats, who used to be Southern Democrats, because of this coded language and because of this targeting, because of this Southern strategy, they moved to the Republican Party. Kevin Phillips, who was a key strategist for Richard Nixon, said it plainly in 1970. He said, and I quote, "The more Negroes who register as Democrats in the South, the more Negrophobe whites will quit the Democrats and become Republicans." I'm telling you that all of this was intentional. This was no accident. Southern strategy is not a myth. It's not folklore. It is a real strategy that strategists used on the Republican side to get the angry white base to move over from the Southern Democrats over to the Republican Party. Lee Atwater, also another Republican strategist, broke it down like this. And I can't use all the words that he used, but I'm going to do the best I can. He said, end quote, "You start out in 1954 by saying in. And you know what I'm saying. The bad version of Negro. So you start out in 1954 by saying, well, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and say it because this is actual language. This is a podcast among friends, and we want to hear as it was saying what was said so we can get the full impact. So Lee Atwater said, you start out in 1954 by saying nigger. By 1968, you can't say nigger. That hurts you, backfires. So you say stuff like forced busing, states' rights, and all that stuff. You're getting so abstract. Now you're talking about cutting taxes. And all these things you're talking about are totally economic things. And a byproduct of them is blacks get hurt worse than whites, end quote. So these are real quotes from real people who drove this narrative, who drove this strategy. And you might say this is ancient history, something that we don't have to deal with nowadays. But I can go as recently as 2012 and pull a quote from Senator Lindsey Graham himself, where he admitted that the Republican Party, after the election of Obama, had a dilemma. In quote, he said, "We're not generating enough angry white guys to stay in business for the long term," end quote. So as we listen to that quote kind of says the quiet part out loud. Base that the Southern strategy helped to desire to cultivate is rooted in grievance. It's rooted in nostalgia, make America great again. And it's rooted in racial resentment. Anyone that does not fit the description of the white male is not someone that they want, or it is someone who they will target in order to pull their target demographic on their side. Not only pull them there, but keep them there as well. So what's the result of all this? What's the result of the Southern strategy? Well, it's a lot. Not only does it make their target base angry enough to go out and vote, but it also led to things like mass incarceration in the Black community and minority community. It also led to over-policing, underfunded schools, the fight against immigration. It led to all these things, using some kind of coded language in its battle. And the intent of this was never hidden. You may not have noticed it, but it wasn't hidden. It was all out there in plain sight. John Ehrlichman, one of Nixon's domestic policy chiefs, he said in a 1994 interview, and I'm going to quote again, he said, "You want to know what this was really all about? The Nixon campaign in 1968 and the Nixon White House after that had two enemies, the anti-war left and Black people. We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or Black. But by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and the Blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did." End quote. So we have a deeply entrenched narrative that explains or blames the victims of the systematic oppression for the very conditions those systems created. The Southern strategy that we talk about, it trained people to see poverty as personal failure and not as a policy outcome. It painted Black people and Black communities as broken while they ignored the policies that broke them. But here's the tragic part. This is the tragic part. Some of us started believing the madness too. When I say us, I mean us in the Black community. You'll hear people saying things like, well, Clinton signed those laws too, or both parties did it, or what's the difference? And I say, yeah, well, Clinton era policies like welfare reform and mass deportations did hurt the community. That's a fact. But pointing to past harm does not justify continuing down the same road, because that's a false equivalence. That's deflection. If your takeaway from history is that we should keep repeating it, you didn't learn the right lesson. I did, and we're calling it out right now, no matter who's in power. And those in the community that I come from that look at others in the community that are impacted by this policy or these policies, this strategy, you look at them and you cast blame on them. Well, your blame is misdirected. Maya Angelou once wrote a beautiful poem called Caged Bird.
Oh Lord, I want 2 wings to guide my feet. Oh Lord, I want 2 wings to guide my hands. Oh Lord, I want 2 wings to hold my eyes so the world won't do me no harm. A free bird jumps on the back of the wind and floats downstream till the currents end and dips its wings in the bright sun rays and dares to claim the sky. But a caged bird stands on the grave of dreams, often shouting a nightmare scream. Its wings are clipped, its feet are tied, so it opens its mouth to sing. The caged bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown but longed for still. And its song is heard on a distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. A free bird thinks of another breeze and the trade winds soft through the sighing trees and fat worms waiting on a dawn bright lawn, and it names the sky its own. But a caged bird stands on the grave of dreams, shadows shouting a nightmare scream. Its wings are clipped, its feet are tied, so it opens its mouth to sing. The caged bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown but longed for still. And its voice is heard on the distant hill because the caged bird sings of freedom. Oh Lord, I want 2 wings to guide my feet. Oh Lord, I want 2 wings to guide my mind. Oh Lord, I want 2 wings to hold my arms so the world won't do me no harm.
The caged bird sings of freedom. Some people think that they've escaped the cage. Others are still singing from inside it. But here's the truth. We are all impacted by the system that built it in the first place. And even those who have escaped, even if your success is tangible, yet it requires silence about the injustice that you're seeing, you're not really free. You're just comfortable. And I didn't come here to be comfortable. I came here to challenge the system that has clipped the wings of so many birds. So, some within the Black community have found some sort of financial or social success, and that's fine. They are the birds who have escaped the cage. They looked at the door, saw that it was open, and they flew right out. But too often, very too often, they look back at those who are still inside the cage and they condemn them as if the cage no longer exists simply because they themselves have found a way out. But I'm not here to fight the cage bird. I'm not here to talk badly about them and those who remain inside the cage. I'm here to destroy the cage because cage has no purpose. Because even when the cage is there and the door stands wide open, fear, trauma, and generational injustice can keep anyone from flying through that door. So Maya Angelou's poem reminds us that the caged bird still sings, not because it's free, but because it looks for and longs for freedom that it's never known. And that song that they sing is simply a cry for justice, for dignity, for opportunity. And it is often dismissed or even mocked by those who have mistaken proximity to privilege for some sort of real liberation. It ain't real. So, what do we do? We're here now. What do we do now? For one, we stop letting past harm excuse present injustice. Two, we got to stop dividing ourselves with these false comparisons. Three, we got to stop making proximity to privilege real liberation. You may be free of the cage, but you still remain captive of an even larger system, one from which there can be no true escape until every bird flies free. The first Black woman who was elected to Canadian legislator by the name of Rosemary Brown, she once said, "Until all of us have made it, none of us have made it." And so you and I and anyone who might come across this podcast, we write a new playbook, one that's built on truth, equality, and community. So this blog, the one that I wrote as a result of a discussion that I had, is available on LaBruceForCongress.com in the Insights tab, as well as a whole lot of other stuff that I wrote, about issues. So go there, read the full blog, then share it, talk about it, challenge someone on it. Because the more we expose the old playbook, the faster we can build something better. The faster we can stop talking about this past, this history, and walk and live in something better, something that's meant to be for all of us, not just a chosen few. So until next time, keep rising, keep roaring, and remember, none of us have made it until all of us have made it.